Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Money Matters TV. My name is Dan White. I am the president and CEO of Daniel A. White and Associates. We are a retirement and financial planning firm headquartered in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. We have two satellite offices, one in Middletown, Delaware, and we just opened a third office down in Lewis, Delaware, down the Delaware beaches. And we work primarily with people that are 55 to 75 and up. Those people approaching retirement, those people already in retirement that are looking for strategies to help with longevity issues, when to claim Social Security, and a variety of other subjects. And today I'm joined on the show by Tami Fratis, the Managing Director of ACT Capital Advisors. Tami, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dan. And you and I need to talk offline since your clients could be my clients. My firm helps business owners with successful exits. We also help them, the younger clients of yours, with acquisitions. So ACT Capital Advisors works with middle market firms throughout the United States and Canada. We have 15 offices and we have 50 managing directors, 50. And we focus in all industries except for cannabis, alcoholic beverages and breweries, and companies without revenues. So it's so great to be on the show. I'm excited to meet our guest.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And it goes both ways. I mean, some of your clients might be candidates to become some of our clients.
Absolutely. Which I'm curious, for your clients, what are you telling them about the new election, our second term with Trump? Well, how's that going?
Most people seem pretty excited with the outcome of the election, but I kind of caution them and tell them that, all right, the election's over. We've had the Trump bump, a little run up in the markets and so forth. But I said even before the election, I said, no matter who wins, whoever wins, they're inheriting a real mess. I mean, the $36 trillion of debt did not go away. The war in the Middle East didn't go away. The war in Russia didn't go away. They still have the government is still, way too big. And Trump wants to come in and cut the size of the government, and God bless him. I hope he can, because we all know it certainly needs to be cut. But, every action has a reaction.
Absolutely.
So, if you're going to lay off half of the federal government, unemployment's going to skyrocket. And then you not only have the government employees that are not contributing to GDP, you got all the contractors in the DC area that rely on the government, for their income. And as they say, one man's bill is another man's revenue. So they start cutting heads down there. There's going to be some fallout.
And what do you think about inflation? What can we expect with inflation?
Well, it seems to me that no matter who gets in office, and I hope Trump's different this time, but both Democrats and Republicans spend way too much money. Mm-hmm. And, inflation, I don't think is going to go away. And I kind of question what the Federal Reserve is even doing. If you look at the economic reports, GDP has been good. I mean, 3%, north of 3%, this is a pretty good economy. Unemployment's still relatively low. And they raised rates for the better part of 2 years because inflation got out of control, and now they're cutting rates. Well, if the economy's growing and doing well, and you're starting to cut rates, that's inflationary. That's going to make prices go up. So I just wonder how long. I mean, now with the unemployment figures and the inflation figures coming in today, they were kind of in line, maybe ticked up a little bit. Everybody's kind of saying there's like a 90% chance the Fed's going to cut rates another quarter point in a couple of weeks. And, I don't know if that's the right move, because, you got a good economy, it's growing, and now you're cutting rates. It's kind of like pouring gas on the fire.
So you don't think they're going to cut rates then?
I do. I think they are, but I just wonder. I think because they when they started cutting rates, they went with a 50 basis point cut, which was a big one. Everybody was kind of thinking a quarter point, and they jump out of the gate with a 50 basis point cut. The last one was a quarter. I think they're going to do another quarter, but I just worry that with inflation maybe heading on the upswing, how long are they going to cut rates, and when might they have to pivot and start raising rates again? But the elephant in the room really is the debt. I mean, I don't know if they're getting any pressure from the government. I mean, there's a lot of government debt that has to be rolled over this year, and you got low rates, and now you're going to roll it over at 4.5%. I mean, the federal government really can't afford it.
Right. Okay. Well, it's an interesting time, that's for sure.
That is for sure. But you told us a little bit, Tami, about ACT Capital Advisors and how you help people exit. As business owners, we're getting toward the end of the year. We're almost in the Christmas holidays. As they're approaching the end of 2024, if they're looking to sell, what are the top 3 tasks they should complete in order to have a productive 2025?
Yeah, that's a great question. And all the business owners out there, whether you're planning on selling or not, you should still be thinking about this. You want to write down your business goals for the upcoming year, and that's both top line and bottom line. And then you want to identify any issues that you think might hinder you achieving those goals. It might be that you're having some employee issues, people not showing up, or unionization. It could be that costs are going up, so maybe you have to look for new suppliers. But put it down, just brainstorm and just throw it all down on a list and see what you could do to mitigate those risks. And then also for your customers, new customers don't come on board if they perceive risk. Everyone seems to be risk adverse. So what can you do to reduce perceived purchasing risk for your customers, your new potential customers, or even your existing customers, so that they re-up for next year? And then as far as when you're going against competition, how can you unseat the competition or the incumbent? What could you do either from a guarantee perspective or from giving something extra, even if it's better customer service? So that's what I would focus on. And we are at a good time for selling businesses because there's a lot of interest in from private equity firms and corporate strategic from buying businesses, because as Dan said, interest rates, even though they went up last year, they're still pretty low. And labor is hard to find. So if you acquire a business that has a stable labor pool, well, now you've just hired more employees. So it's a really good time to think about exiting, but you have to get ready. It's just like if you're going to get married, there's certain things you have to do before the wedding date.
Well, that's for sure. You definitely, bridezilla, right? I mean, you got to be ready for what comes next. And
I was thinking more like you figure out where you're going to get married and lose some weight, or pick out the color scheme. I wasn't thinking about bridezilla, but okay.
Try to fit into that wedding dress.
Yeah, always tough.
Yeah, but anyway, Tami, we got a question from our audience. Sally Edwards from Philadelphia wants to know, what is the VC's approach to investing?
Okay, well, that's a great question, Sally. It is structured. What VCs have to do is they have to find high potential startups or early stage businesses. So they have to network, they have to go to industry events, they have to talk to the startup communities, because there's a lot of VCs out there. That's a competitive space. Then once they find a potential business, they have to do due diligence. So they have to really evaluate the team and the business model and the market potential. How big's the market? And how much cash does a business really need to grow? Because why most businesses fail is they run out of cash, or it's a CEO issue. Then they have to negotiate what they're going to buy the business for, because it is buying equity or producing or giving a loan. And either way, you have to know what the business is worth, and you have to negotiate it with the CEO, who always thinks, his baby's prettier than the next baby. So it is a negotiation. And then once you agree to the terms, you obviously have to invest in the business, where you take equity, or you might provide some convertible debt, which is debt that converts to equity at a later date. And then you have to support the business, because most early stage CEOs don't have all the answers. So they need answers. And then VCs aim for either an IPO or a sale to a strategic. That's why having been a VC is helpful in my business now, because that's who I talk to about helping their portfolio companies get sold. So that's what I would say to you, Sally. It's an interesting industry, and it's certainly very competitive, but also very exciting industry to make a lot of money for both the investors and the CEOs that are invested in and the venture capitalists.
Yeah, I think that's an area that a lot of people don't know a whole lot about.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
John Stanford, the executive director of Incubate, on the show with us. John, we want to talk to you and ask you a few questions. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, why don't you start, John, by just telling us a little bit about Incubate, who they are and what they do.
Absolutely. Well, Tami laid it out so well, we may have to hire her. My job is simple. Incubate is the national voice for life science venture capitalists. So her answer was spot on about all the things that VCs are doing. And my job is to work in Washington and around the country to make sure we have the right environment for venture capital. Venture capital is not uniquely American, but taking big risk for big reward is certainly American. And we need to make sure that we have the right environment for those investments, the entrepreneurs, and the rewards that they need to reinvest in the next big breakthrough.
So, John, you mentioned the VC component of the ecosystem, but what else do what else do your companies need other than the VC investment and support?
Well, the first thing, particularly in life sciences, which is a little different from tech or fintech or other startup areas, you need great science. And I think sometimes we forget about that. Fundamental to all of this is really transformational research that's going to make a meaningful difference in the lives of patients. And I should remind us, we're all going to be patients someday, and we certainly all have loved ones who are patients. So it all begins with great science. Then it begins with an entrepreneur who says, I think this science could become a product, but it's really expensive, billions and billions of dollars. The latest studies say it takes about $3 billion to bring an idea into your medicine cabinet. And so they go out looking for people who are willing to subsidize that risk. And that's what venture capital does. But it's important to remember, 9 out of 10 of our investments will go absolutely nowhere. They will fail. They will not get a return on that investment. And that's what's a little different to some extent than other investors, because that 10th investment, that one that does make it, has to make it big. And so it's great science and great entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, John. We had a woman on the show earlier this year, and she was in this field, and she had said that she'd been working on this product, I think, for close to 9 years, and she was the president of the company, and really there was no revenue yet, for 9 years. I mean, that's kind of crazy when you think about it.
It's definitely different. And 9 years still makes her a little bit of a junior. Some close friends are running biotechs. They're in their second or third decade working on the same molecule, the same idea, and that it could change people's lives. And we don't think about that when we pop a pill because we're not feeling so great, or breakthroughs in cancer, Alzheimer's, others. Someone's been working on the drugs we're taking today since the 90s. And so think of all the hairstyles ago that have come and gone, while one person has been working away building a company on one product. And so it's definitely different. A lot of scientists will spend their whole careers working on 1 or 2 products.
So today, what's the state of life science investing? Is there an appetite?
I think so. It's really strong. We continue to see 30 or 40 billion dollars a year being plowed into this industry by early stage venture capital. We continue to see hundreds of billions of dollars from the large manufacturers in this space. And what's driving that is incredible breakthroughs over the last decade. mRNA, biologics, immunotherapies. We have so many more tools in the toolkit to deal with disease. And we're finally entering the truly golden era where we don't just treat disease, but we cure disease. 10 years ago, hepatitis C would be a chronic condition that you would deal with your whole life. We now cure it over the course of weeks. And so I think there's a ton of interest in funding that kind of research that can also be a great financial investment that provides returns. But there definitely are some headwinds. And I think we've got to tackle and be honest that we got to make sure that the reward is equal to the risk. And both some of the decisions in Washington, some of the decisions in the market are making that risk maybe not worth the reward in certain cases. And so it varies. But where there's great science, it's also a great financial investment.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tami.
Okay, Dan, I'm sorry. What I think I heard you saying then, John, is that the 1 out of 10 that really make it big, they impact everyone in their everyday life, whether it's for them personally or their children or their parents or their grandparents. So life sciences play a role in all of our lives. But what are investors thinking now that we're heading into a second Trump administration? How does that change things?
Well, I think there are a few moving pieces that the incoming administration will be relevant to the life sciences community. The first isn't limited to just biotechs and biopharmaceuticals, and that's a return to a healthy M&A environment. I think observers on both sides of the aisle would say that the Biden administration's opposition to mergers and acquisitions made it really hard to invest in certain areas, because you have to remember that when the venture capital invests the money, you hit it spot on earlier, they're looking for an IPO or they're looking for an exit. The IPO market hasn't been particularly strong. And so then you look at the merger and acquisition marketplace, and it was really hard to push things through under this administration. I think everyone is hopeful that we can return to the virtuous life cycle where people can exit and a much healthier M&A environment.
Hear, hear.
I think, Tami, you're personally invested in seeing a much stronger and healthier M&A environment. And that's what we need, because unlike tech or other places, you don't want a drug to come out of someone's garage.
Right.
It's important to remember, we want this stuff to be safe and effective. And that is why this industry is so heavily regulated. And that's why large manufacturers like Pfizer and Merck and others dedicate so much time and energy to figuring out good manufacturing processes, that actually we have this great relay race where we hand off the baton from academia and research to entrepreneurs and then to manufacturers. But a bad M&A environment breaks up the relay race. And that's been a real problem over the last couple of years.
I agree.
I think that's something that people don't recognize is, like you said, you pop a pill, you don't think about how it came to be, but you think about some of the drugs that people are using today, metformin and for diabetes and stuff along those lines. People don't realize that it may have taken 30 years to bring that to market. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. But when you look at this type of environment, John, what are some of the potential problems or challenges or obstacles the VC community is anticipating going forward?
Well, I think you said it earlier, Dan, that every action has a reaction. And unfortunately, during the Biden administration, some policies were put in place that are picking winners out of Washington. Different types of medicines are going to get different kinds of rewards. And that's something we're working with in a bipartisan manner to undo, because we don't want weights on the scale of what scientists are looking to do. I don't know if the next breakthrough is in Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis or Alzheimer's or any of the other thousands of diseases that need more breakthroughs. But I'd rather have scientists and science leading the way. And so there were some particular problems in the way the Inflation Reduction Act that now disincentivizes the development of pills that you can go to Walgreens or CVS or your independent pharmacy and fill. And instead, investors are being told, we want the really expensive drugs because you'll get a bigger reward that requires someone to go to a hospital or a clinic. We need a common sense fix to that, because we don't want 5 years from now to be telling everyone, oh, you've got to go into the hospital. That's inefficient. And actually, it's going to end up costing the country a lot more money if we don't fix an issue like that. And so something we're working every day on both sides of the aisle is making sure people understand we respond to incentives. And if you incentivize one type of medicine over another, that's exactly where the investment's going to go. And we are tracking that investment, and it's been moving away from certain therapeutic areas. And that takes away hope from patients.
So then part of your objectives is to influence federal policy to the benefit of consumers, the startups that you help, and investors. Is that true?
That's absolutely right. My job is to help Congress, who may not have a deep understanding in venture capital and biotech policy, and help them understand that what your constituents want back home is good, affordable, accessible healthcare. And I bet you that every single one of them believes we have more breakthroughs ahead of us. And so I need to show them, here are the policies that need to change. One example, like the EPIC Act, that's going to let pills be incentivized just the same as large molecule, what we call biologic drugs. And so that's exactly our job. Our job is to help shape policymakers' opinions on these things and get good common sense policy in place so investors and entrepreneurs can do the rest.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that people in Congress don't really understand a lot of the things that get put in front of them. I've been down to Washington a couple times. It's amazing. I'm not sure how they get anything done down there. But why would you say, John, why is there so much fluctuation in the market data?
I think there's a few different pieces that contribute to unclear signs. You also have to remember that in the early stage ecosystem, some of the data itself is really hard to understand. A lot of action forcing events for the companies we're investing in come out of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials out of the FDA. And it's really hard to see the forest through the trees or the trees through the forest when you get so many different data points to look at. I also think the market, it's been a tough several years for biotech for a lot of reasons. It's hard to pinpoint, well, is it government policy, or is it investors just prefer tech over biotech, or have we just had a few misses on scientific data? There's so many different inputs here that drive the valuation of a company. It is tough to sort out. And that's one of the reasons why life science venture capital tends to be pretty rarefied air of people who have a lot of experience in this space to navigate all these different data points, because you can look at the market and you can see one class of drugs like GLP-1s, the obesity drugs that everyone's talking about. Who doesn't want that in their portfolio? But there are a whole host of other therapeutic areas that aren't doing so well. And so sifting through it is really complex, and it varies greatly. But I'll tell you what, the fundamental thing that makes a good investment is good science. And if you can find good science, it'll lead to a good investment.
So, John, how would John or Jane Q. Public evaluate a public company that they might want to invest in as far as good science? How would they determine what's good science?
I think it's really challenging for individual investors to get their heads around just one biotech at a time. Now, a lot of these data reports are made public, and Incubate watches very closely the SEC filings of these companies, small biotechs. And in that, you'll find a treasure trove of data. How are the trials going? What kind of data? What kind of endpoints are we seeing? But without it is hard with just one biotech to know what's working or not working. until that data goes public. And then you're at the whims of the market of how they're interpreting it. And that's why venture capital invests across a broad diversity of companies all in the same area, because we can't be sure who's going to make it. And so individual investors, it's really hard to just pick one biotech and see that as successful. But there are exceptions. If you see people who are building platform technologies like mRNA, or they have underlying technology for something like a GLP-1, the Ozempics and Wegovys that are making headlines, you might make an investment play explicitly around that. But it is hard to be an individual investor picking winners in the biotech space.
And Dan, what would you say? What would you advise your clients that came to you and said, I want to invest in this biotech company?
Well, it's interesting because I was at a lecture a couple months back, and the gentleman was speaking about these weight loss drugs. And he says they really are the trend of the future, because not only, I mean, if people lost weight, think about it. America is for the most part an obese country. So if you got people to lose a lot of weight, how does that help their joints and their, everything else that goes along, their blood pressure, their, everything else that goes along with being overweight? He said that could be a real game changer as far as the health insurance industry. You just get people to lose weight. And if these drugs are going to be that practical and that effective, that might be something, investors want to look at, because that could be the wave of the future.
And I was thinking maybe tell them, an ETF, a fund that lumped a bunch of the biotech companies together, like the weight loss drugs, or something that tracks the index in the biotech sector, something like that. Yeah. Similar to a VC strategy, diversify, but within a particular sector.
Yeah. Hey, John, one final question. We're almost out of time here, but looking at VCs going forward in 2025, what are really the top three trends that the VCs are anticipating in the next year?
I think the first and second and third are probably all a return to M&A activity, and maybe they have different consequences that I'll share, but we've had a lot of capital deployed and not a lot of exits. And that capital has to exit to get back to the limited partners and to be reinvested in other companies. So I think you're going to see a trend of VCs looking to move what's in their portfolio to a strategic, which also means strategics may have a little bit of a buying opportunity and get things at good valuations that, frankly, we did not see. We saw run-ups in some of these valuations that really scared off a lot of the strategics. And so I think we'll see a big return there within a merger and acquisition environment enabled by the FTC. I think we're going to see a lot of that. What else does that do? It means there needs to be a second round deployment of capital. And I think we're going to see a lot of VCs, to Tami's point earlier, looking around for those deals. And so if you're an early stage entrepreneur, I think another trend is now's the time to go back to that VC whose money has been tied up the last couple of years and make a compelling case. But a lesson that we all learned is cash is king, and companies need to watch their burn rates, because VCs learned through the COVID era that we can do this in a thriftier way, and that's going to be expected out of companies.
Yeah. That's great information, John. We really appreciate your input on the show today. It was great having you. Tami, thanks for being on the show today. That wraps up another edition of Money Matters TV. And next week is going to be Raj, I'll probably butcher this, but Raj Rajuzakaran from Allcron. They are a leukemia drug company. So you want to tune in and find out about that. And that wraps up another edition. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and tune in next week for another edition of Money Matters TV.